10 years ago, Nissan became one of the very first automakers in the world to debut a series production electric car. It wasn't a limited production model or a lease-only test fleet vehicle. It was an honest-to-goodness, family-friendly electric car. It could seat 5. It featured over-the-air telematics, which was a first for any legacy automaker. And back then, when people's expectations over electric car range were far smaller than they are today, it managed an EPA-approved 73 miles of range per charge, with optional DC quick charging to refill its 24 kilowatt-hour battery pack from empty to 80% full in somewhere around 30 minutes. While many people, me included, flocked to the Nissan Leaf by virtue of it being the first to market in most of the world. Technically, the Mitsubishi i-MiEV actually entered into production first, but really wasn't well suited to a global market in its original form. Nissan's Leaf hasn't aged very well. Poor engineering of the original Leaf's battery pack, using passive air cooling rather than active liquid cooling, combined with its original cell chemistry, conspired to cause premature battery aging and subsequent capacity-induced range loss. And Nissan's increasingly frustrating attitude towards battery replacement requests over the last decade, including asking customers in some markets to shell out thousands or even tens of thousands of dollars for replacement packs, have done Nissan no favours. Neither has Nissan's decision to keep the second-generation Leaf's battery pack cooled using the same method as its troubled predecessor, which of course led to RapidGate, where Nissan's solution to premature heat-caused battery degradation was to mollycoddle a battery pack in the 2018 Leaf to the point that it would only rapid charge once per day at a normal rapid charge speed before ramping that charge speed down by a factor of 2 or more to protect the cells. And while the original Nissan Leaf and its second-generation successor are great cars for round-town use in climates where the temperature doesn't get too hot, and I should know, I've put more than 140,000 miles on the 2 first-generation Leafs I've owned, Nissan's EV foo hasn't been all that great of late. Indeed, with better competition from rival automakers in many markets, Nissan's suffered poor sales and some pretty big losses of late. Yet earlier today, or yesterday, depending on where you are in the world and when you're watching this, Nissan unveiled its first all-new electric car since the Leaf's original debut, the production version of the 2021 Nissan Ariya SUV. And it's managed to fix everything that was wrong with the original Leaf. And frankly, I think you should be excited about it. I am. So here's everything you need to know. And yes, today's video is going to be a little on the long side to cover everything, but I think it's going to be worth it. And keep your eyes peeled for metric equivalents where pertinent, because we'll add those on screen. The Ariya is smaller than a Rogue from outside, yet has a larger wheelbase while maintaining a similar turning circle than its internal combustion engine relation. And inside, thanks to the long wheelbase and now traditional battery-in-the-chassis design that so many automakers are using, it has more internal space than a Nissan Murano. More importantly, Nissan has ditched the forced air cooling pouch cell battery packs of the Leaf and opted for prismatic nickel-cobalt-manganese aluminium cells from Chinese battery supplier CATL. And both of the battery pack variants available for the Ariya, 63 kilowatt-hour and 87 kilowatt-hour usable respectively, are liquid-cooled. As is becoming the norm, the battery pack itself is also integrated into the vehicle's chassis as a structural element, with load-bearing cross-members forming an integral part of the vehicle's chassis. So why switch to liquid cooling? Well, yesterday evening, ahead of the car's official launch, I was lucky enough to be one of a handful of journalists to attend an invite-only roundtable discussion with 2 important members of the Nissan Ariya team, Nissan's Program Director for Ariya, Giovanni Aroba, and Nissan's Chief Product Specialist of Ariya, Makoto Fukuda. And I asked that question of both of them directly. Perhaps unsurprisingly, the answer given to me was that, based on feedback from customers about range and charging, Nissan decided the Ariya needed to be able to perform better at both the rapid charging station as well as on the road. The goal, I was told, was being able to drive 800 kilometers in a total of 8 hours, including any necessary time recharging. The only logical way to do that, I was told, was to implement active liquid cooling, something that frankly has been de facto amongst most of the electric auto industry for years, but which Nissan has been painfully slow to adopt. Unsurprisingly, Nissan did not cite the switch to liquid cooling as being driven by some of the issues that first and second generation Leafs had with their forced air battery packs. And frankly, I doubt any automaker would be super keen to admit that as a cause to switch. But given Nissan is a Japanese company and saving face is pretty darned important in the Japanese boardroom, I suspect the above explanation is far more acceptable than "we screwed up." Feedback-informed design seemed to play quite a big part in the evolution of the design of Ariya as well, with Nissan moving charge port doors on the Ariya away from the nose of the vehicle. Aside from making it easier to meet pedestrian impact safety standards we were told last night, it would also make it easier from a consumer point of view, with the Japanese version of the Ariya having its CHAdeMO DC quick charge port located in front of the front passenger door pillar on the A pillar. The reason? Most charging stations are on the pavement side, and thus it makes sense to have the rapid charge port located there too. Talking of charging though, it's probably time to clear up some confusion that's already been bandied about online in the last 24 hours. In Japan, the Ariya will come with a CHAdeMO port on one side of the vehicle and a standard J1772 socket on the other. That's because in Japan these two charge standards are the norm, and it allows the Ariya to be used with vehicle-to-grid systems that rely on CHAdeMO, which are pretty big in Japan. In Europe, North America, and other markets around the world where CCS has become the de facto standard DC quick charge system of choice, the Ariya will come with just one charge port containing the relevant CCS charge port for the market it's in. So CCS Combo 1 for North America, and CCS Combo 2 for most of the rest of the world. Nissan says the Ariya will be able to charge at up to 130 kilowatts peak rate from a compatible charging station, adding an estimated 175 miles of range in about a half-hour charging session. Since the battery is a 400-volt battery pack, that means a maximum charge current of about 350 amps. What isn't particularly clear from this, sadly, is if Nissan plans to implement any form of V2G capabilities in CCS market countries. It is expected that CCS will have V2G capabilities from about 2025 onwards, but Nissan didn't mention this in its briefing or its roundtable, and any compatibility plans weren't discussed. Sadly, there wasn't enough time to go into depth on this one, but I am going to try and get an answer, so when I have one, I will share. Changes to rapid charging, like the new battery pack design, are great, but where Nissan disappoints is the onboard maximum charge rate for home charging systems, at least in terms of North America. There, the Ariya will top out at 7.5 kilowatts of onboard charging power, but in Europe and other markets where three-phase power is more common at home, Nissan will offer a 22 kilowatt three-phase charging capability for the larger capacity 87 kilowatt hour variants of Ariya. 7.5 kilowatts may disappoint many, but Nissan does argue, quite fairly, that most of the time the onboard charger will only be used for nighttime charging. And since three-phase charging at residential locations in North America is about as rare as unicorn poop, well, I guess it sucks to be us. Enough of charging and batteries though, and on to performance. As expected, Nissan is launching two drivetrain options. There's a single motor front-wheel drive model and a dual motor all-wheel drive variant. The latter is being called the Ariya All-Wheel Drive E-Force, spelled E-4ORCE. Don't ask me. Depending on battery specifications, you'll be left with a range of different performance and power outputs. For example, the entry-level Nissan Ariya with front-wheel drive and entry-level 63 kWh usable battery pack will output 160 kilowatts at the wheels and 221 pound-feet of torque. Opt for the larger 87 kWh usable pack and the power at the wheels will increase to about 178 kilowatts. Top speed for both of these models is limited to 99 miles per hour, with sprint times from 0 to 62 miles per hour being 7.5 and 7.6 seconds respectively. The larger capacity battery pack resulting in the slower sprint time, despite the extra motor power because of the heavier pack. But if you opt for the all-wheel drive model, you'll see 205 kilowatts at the wheels with the 63 kilowatt-hour usable pack and 413 pound-feet of torque. But if you go for the larger 87 kilowatt-hour usable pack, you'll see power increase to 225 kilowatts and 442 pound-feet of torque. But perhaps the most interesting variant is the Nissan's range-topping performance Ariya, something that wasn't even mentioned in all of the press releases, but I noticed it when I was perusing the European Ariya press releases. Note to self, always read all available market press releases because they're remarkably different for the same car. Paired with 290 kilowatts at the wheels and the 87 kilowatt-hour usable battery pack, it drops sprint times from 0 to 62 miles per hour to 5.1 seconds versus the 5.9 and 5.7 for the other all-wheel drive versions. Top speed of all three, though, is 124 miles per hour. At this point, I should discuss range, and Nissan's North American press release notes the large capacity Ariya front-wheel drive variant wins with a target 300 miles estimated by Nissan. In Europe, because they use the WLTP test cycle, not the EPA test cycle, that estimate has been risen to 310 miles. And frankly, why I don't really like using the WLTP test cycle unless I have to, I'm going to stick with those figures here because Nissan UK has given us estimates across the board, ranging from 223 miles for the entry-level two-wheel drive Ariya and 211 miles for the entry-level all-wheel drive Ariya through to the 285 miles for the all-wheel drive longer-range Ariya and 248 miles for the all-wheel drive performance. Excitingly, for those who've called for more EVs to be able to tow, Ariya is also rated to tow, but how much you'll be able to tow will change in each market. Last night we were told that it would be rated at £1,500 in North America, but according to the UK press release, it's 1,500 kilos in Europe. I'm guessing the differences are due to whatever legislation is required for towing in each market. Obviously, I don't have pricing for everything yet, but Nissan North America is promising the entry-level variant will retail from, quote, about $40,000 US. I'm not entirely sure what the range-topping model will fetch, but frankly, I'd be surprised if you have change from $55,000. Or well into Tesla Model Y territory. How far, how fast, and how much out of the way? Let's talk about the interior. And frankly, I'm really pleased with how Nissan's made the inside of the Ariya look. The air conditioning units are actually pushed under the bonnet. There's no frunk as a consequence, but that means the inside of the Ariya's cockpit is open and clean and minimalist, with a pretty large amount of space for driver and passengers. One unique feature I've not seen before is the ability to scoot the centre armrest assembly back, and that does include the electronic gear selector. Because the air conditioner is out of the cabin, and I should note that the air conditioning controls are haptic touch affairs that I learned to hate when I owned a Chevy Volt, Nissan has been able to add a second glove box storage area as well as a fold-out tray, which could make for a mobile workspace while charging. There's also a sunroof as standard, which isn't really a surprise as it's pretty much standard on most SUVs and crossovers today. But one thing that may concern some inside the car is the seat design, which, in order to give as much interior space as possible, is pretty thin. Nissan was eager to talk about the minimalist seat design and how much extra space they give passengers as a consequence last night. But until I've had a chance to try this out myself, I'm going to reserve judgment, especially given how many people criticise the similarly thin seats of the Chevrolet Bolt EV. Also noted as a change to the original and second generation Leafs inside is the new flat floor, which Nissan was also keen to point out. But frankly, flat floors in electric vehicles are the norm by now, so this is definitely a case of Nissan playing catch up. As for cargo space, well, here is where it gets interesting, as cargo space not only depends on which version you buy, but which market you're in. And I'm rounding down figures to 2 decimal places here, and I'm using imperial measurements. So let me explain. If you live in a right-hand drive market, the front-wheel drive variant manages 16.45 cubic feet of space, while the left-hand drive variant with the same battery pack manages 16.52 cubic feet. Opt for the all-wheel drive variant, and cargo space decreases to 14.4 cubic feet for the right-hand drive markets and 14.65 cubic feet in left-hand drive countries. No reason has been given for the differences between right and left-hand markets, but I'd guess it's all to do with the rear layout of internal components. Finally, let's have a look at driver tech. Nissan has rolled out an all-new cockpit, which seems fully customizable with dual 12.3-inch screens, full colour head-up display, voice control, and an AI-fed and context-aware route planning system. There are haptic controls for much of the control surfaces in the car, and smartphone connectivity with the Nissan Connect telematics app. ProPilot 2.0, Nissan's next iteration of its semi-autonomous driver assistance software, will be available as standard, but exactly which functionality you get will depend on local laws where you live. It's not fully autonomous yet, but Nissan is planning over-the-air software updates for Ariya. Sadly, what's not clear is if those updates will include updates to ProPilot. But what we do know is that, like Ford, Nissan is planning a dual-slot upgrade system, meaning the car can download updates in the background without requiring you to park up. And then when you turn your car on the next time, it will just switch over to the latest version. As I predicted earlier this week, the Ariya comes in below Model Y money, which is great for the segment, but at $40,000 it's still a bit pricey. Add in the $7,500 federal tax credit if you're in the US. Yes, Nissan hasn't hit the limit for tax credits yet, and it's far more palatable. I should note that the Bolt EUV, which will cross-shop against the Ariya, will not get to benefit from this. So there you have it. There's a lot to unpack here, and I hope I've covered most of the bases. Obviously, I'll bring you more in the coming weeks as I learn more about the Ariya, and as soon as lockdowns are lifted and we go back to normal, whatever that is, I hope I can get some time behind the wheel, and of course, I'll take you along with me. For what it's worth, on paper at least, the Nissan Ariya is a cracking car that obliterates some of the original challenges of the Nissan Leaf. But it also does something rather unfortunate in doing so. It makes the current Nissan Leaf a very poor buy and automatically devalues any Leafs overnight. It's hard to envisage Nissan continuing Leaf at the moment with the Ariya coming to market, unless it can dramatically improve the value for money of said car. And the future of Leaf is something I've not been able to get an answer about from Nissan yet. So I'll keep trying. That's it. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you next time.